This program was brought to you by the Illinois State Bar Association. All copyrights are owned by the ISBA. If you have any questions regarding the content of this presentation, please contact the presenters at isba.fastcle.com/questions.
Hello, my name is Bill Moller. I'm in Chicago, and I'm a host at WGN Radio. And the presentation I'm going to give you here is basically part of the ISBA Faculty Development Series. And what this is essentially is presentation skills, how to be typically in a panel discussion, either by yourself or with a panel, and how to come across as effectively as possible. What you want to do is become aware, that is self-aware, to be more attuned to how you come across to other people and whatever you're doing with your face, your expressive qualities, and in what you're doing with your voice. Think about that. Start becoming more self-aware and making adjustments where you feel you're coming up short. Now, in a panel conversation, you have to be aware of that the moment the camera comes up, you are on. That is showtime. And so you have to have, right out of the gate, the appropriate kind of a bearing. And what I mean by that is, how are you sitting? Are you sitting like this with your arms folded, your head to the side? Or are you giving off, I guess you might call it, positive energy? Even if somebody is introducing you, you should sit there with your body positioned thusly, leaning slightly forward, certainly not with your back on the back of the chair, your head up, your shoulders back, which is the look of confidence, your back erect, and your eyes with sort of a bright, sparkly energy. You want to be smiling too, looking warm and approachable so that people have a good opening feeling about you. Now, if you're doing it in the lecture format and nobody's introducing you, still, as you introduce yourself, as I did, you have to have those same kinds of qualities there. Sitting forward, bright look, and trying to engage with the audience. So the bearing point is very important, because if you have a smile on your face, and by the way, this goes for your day-to-day activities, that smile on your face is sort of the trigger for people to immediately respond in a favorable way to you. We're much more likely to have a warm feeling about somebody who is smiling at us, even if it's somebody smiling through a lens to you as you're watching me on a computer screen, or if you have the equipment at home through your home television set. And have in your head thoughts of poise, confidence, being comfortable, showing that you have enthusiasm for what you're about to talk about, and that you are just glad to be there, that you're just almost bubbling over with this kind of exuberance. That really carries well through a camera. By the way, the camera seems to absorb energy, so even if you're sitting here and feel like you're a little bit over the top, that's okay, because when you watch the playback, you'll see that it probably was a very appropriate level of energy that you were giving. So while I might be talking like this typically to somebody who would be sitting directly with me, because I'm talking this way on camera and having a bit more expressiveness in my voice, in my face, I'm using gestures, is very appropriate for this particular electronic setting by which I am talking to you. So have a sense of immediately being on. Also, bearing, as I said, is important. Also, what you're wearing is very important. Here's some do's and don'ts about things to wear. Wear solid, muted colors. Pastels are really good. Blue is a very appropriate color. I'm wearing that today. It's felt that blue reflects positively against most skin tones. Remove all jewelry that moves or makes sound or might click on the lavalier. That's what this is. If I had a big chain around my neck and every time I moved it would click, that would be a huge distraction. Also, you don't want large earrings that are hanging and wiggling. All of that is distracting, because you want people to be focused on what? Your face. And if they're looking at your clothes or your jewelry, that is not the effect that you want to have, because what you're saying is coming from right here, not through everything else. The clothing basically is framing the face. Make sure that your clothes are crisp and well ironed. If you're having ruffles, check them out beforehand. Be sure everything is set properly so that you're not doing this on camera. I've seen people, in fact, during the introduction stage, somebody is introducing them. They don't know that they're actually on camera, and they're preening, and that looks really ridiculous. Make sure your hair is well arranged. You've got makeup on. That's okay. It's very appropriate to be wearing makeup, not for guys, even though I do that typically on camera, though not today, for women to be wearing makeup. And you might even add a little bit extra, because the definition of skin tones and whatnot isn't all that accurately reflected through the electronics. So a little more rouge than you might typically wear, getting rid of the bags under the eyes if you put something there, more mascara. All of that is appropriate on camera. If you can, put in contact lenses rather than regular glasses. Now I'm wearing these glasses for two reasons. I don't have contact lenses, but also because I have an anti-reflective coating on these lenses. And so you shouldn't see the lights reflecting off my eyes and into the camera lens. Now, don't wear these three things. Don't wear the colors white, red, or black. White, just bad generally. It tends to bloom and glow. Red bleeds if it's bright red. You can certainly wear a muted red. Something closer to a pink is okay. And then black or even navy blue. Now, you can't tell this is navy blue. It is, but it looks black to you. There's very little definition in anything that is black. So those are the three colors generally to avoid. Also, tight patterns like herringbone or narrow stripes or narrow checks. That tends to play havoc with the camera electronics and don't really look good on camera. Again, distracting jewelry, large patterns that maybe are metallic and reflect light is bad news. Here's also something you shouldn't do. A dark suit with a dark shirt and a dark tie, guys. It looks a little soprano-y. And for some reason, vests don't tend to look all that good on camera. Now, to prepare your presentation, think about these things. Start with the hook. Your presentation should flow logically from what the topic is. It starts from the hook. You might say, as I did in a longer form of this presentation, what is the biggest fear, the greatest phobia most people have? Well, it's public speaking. That's how I began that presentation. That was, in a sense, the hook. So you want to say something compelling, engaging, surprising, even humorous as an attention grabber. Do that at the outset. That's followed by the introduction. You kind of lay out, these are the 5 points we're going to be talking about in the course of this particular presentation. And then you talk about those 5 points by flowing in and out, using different kinds of devices I'll be talking about to have a narrative flow. You want everything to logically flow together. You've probably seen presentations where that's not the case. It's a lot harder to track what's being said and to retain what's being said if there isn't some thought that's put into the presentation in the preparation stage. Craft strong, clear transitions, and then the conclusion should sort of restate the premise and end with a full resolution. Make your content interesting. Sometimes I've seen presentations that are full of a lot of technical details, and it's very hard for humans to react to that. We're emotional beings, so you want to put in anecdotes, stories, particularly stories that maybe directly involve you. You can talk from a first-person instance about a particular point that you're trying to make. So look for anecdotes, personal stories to add interest into the presentation you're making. Something that's particularly important is to practice. Practice your presentation before people who you can trust will give you honest feedback. Maybe that's a spouse or a good friend. Practice, practice, practice. You cannot practice enough. It's vital because if you stumble through, if you're semi-coherent, if it's disjointed, it doesn't have a logical flow to it, you're not going to be asked back, which maybe is good in your book, but you know, this is advertising. If you do well here, you will attract clients this way. And if you come across well and other lawyers see it, what are they going to do? They're going to be more apt to make referrals to you. So you absolutely want to do as good of a job here. And the way to do that is to structure your presentation, that is the what part of what you're saying, and then practice the presentation so that you can work on the how you're saying it part. Now, the proper presentation in a lecture format, that's what I'm doing right here. It's basically me and you, me and the camera, talking through the camera to you. Be aware that you are on the moment the camera comes on. And you cannot be distracted looking away. If somebody's introducing you, you need to be focused on what that person is saying about you. And then there's no more taking notes. There's no more shuffling of papers. All of that has to have been done in advance because when the camera comes up, showtime, you've got to be delivering. And you want to have that positive energy right out of the gate. That is sitting forward, head up, shoulders back, smile on the face, thinking the thoughts of poise and professionalism, engagement, loving that audience, being excited about the information you're about to share. If you're feeling all of those qualities within, those are the qualities that will come through in your face, the expression qualities of your face, as well as the vocal presentation that you're making. Now, don't forget to address the camera. It's kind of hard to see you out there. The camera is a dark thing in a dark room, but you have to be practiced at doing this. Here's what you should do. Take a piece of paper, draw a big circle as though that was the camera lens, and then put that on the wall. It should be just above eye level. That's typically where the cameras are. They're not looking down at you, but they're looking slightly down at you. So put that on the wall, and then do your presentation into that circle on the wall. A lot of people find that somewhat disconcerting because you're not getting immediate positive or any kind of feedback from an audience, but that's the nature of doing it in a studio. The ISBA is going to be expecting more and more of its presenters to do it in this kind of a context, and I think you'll find that it might even be more preferable to you. For one, you're sitting, and number two, you have complete control over the entire presentation. So again, circle, put it on the wall, and then just practice your presentation to it. You've got to look at that circle, though, as I'm looking at you, as I'm looking at the camera, as though it is a real person, which means you have to use the same expressive qualities that you do when you're talking with friends as you would to this camera lens. Again, it might be hard, but that's where practice comes in. And by the way, the ISBA, you can contact them, particularly when you're in the Chicago area. They'll let you come on in, practice in this very studio. They'll run a tape on your performance, let you take that home, and you can take a look and make some adjustments accordingly. So don't look at the glass lens as though it's a mechanical device. Look at it as though it was a person, a group of people, because that, in fact, is where you are watching this. If the camera is fixed, that is, it's not panning or zooming and following you, be aware of the parameters, that is, the frame size. When do you walk out of the frame or push your hands through the frame? And whatever gestures you make, you want to do that within that frame, because it's not going to be able to zoom out and zoom in accordingly. Speak up. A lot of people do not speak loud enough. This is critically important. You also want to speak with good diction, articulate well. So as you're practicing, think about speaking at a level that is a little higher than you would if you're talking to somebody in the room. If I was talking to you and you were right where the camera was, I would probably talk about this level. But on camera, I need to have more energy, more enthusiasm, and so I'm speaking up. Not necessarily loudly like this, but still with a bit more energy than I typically would in an average conversation that I might have. Yet, you still want to talk conversationally as I am. I am talking to a lens, but I think anybody in the room who would be sitting here listening to me would feel that it sounds like I'm talking to a person. So you want to have that quality to your voice, conversational. And so when you record yourself and play it back, which I highly recommend, listen for that quality. Am I sounding as though I'm really talking to a human being, or do I sound robotic? Or worse, do I sound like I am reading? It's hard to do sometimes, but it's very effective. And on that point, when your presentation is prepared, the practice helps you memorize larger parts of it. You don't need to speak back and repeat memorized lines, but it is helpful to have enough of your presentation internalized in your consciousness so that you don't have to feel compelled to continually look down and spend more of your time reading. You should really spend more of your time directly addressing the camera. So where you're comfortable in your script, put bullet points on those areas where you almost have it already memorized. And then use those instances by looking down where it says, don't forget to address the camera. Okay, that's the part where I'm comfortable, and I can say a bunch of things about that without having to read them. So again, bullet points to give you more latitude in speaking to the audience rather than reading. It's deadly dull, as you've no doubt seen in presentations or in any kinds of settings where somebody's reading something to you rather than talking it to you. Don't talk too fast. Sometimes people, when they speak quickly, their voice tends to go higher, and that's a no-no. You want to keep your voice at a well-modulated, generally a lower pitch point than at a higher point. Speak with conviction, as if you completely believe in the words that you're saying. Conviction sells information effectively, whether it's to a jury or a judge or to an audience listening to you speak. If you use your hands to express yourself, try not to do it in kind of that mechanical, repetitive way, but do it in an illustrative way. That is, there are 3 points I want to make. 1, I mean, that's effective. Or if you're saying, here's where we are at the beginning of the process, and then we move here, and that's a visual way to represent something you're saying. And the eye likes to have that kind of entertainment. So look for instances where you can actually rehearse and build in visual techniques that you can do with your hands or arms or fingers that can help present your information for you. Now there are 4 points. 1, 2, 3. There are all kinds of different ways that you can use your hands effectively in your presentation. When you're working with a slide deck, in this setting, typically it goes up full screen. But sometimes if you're in a classroom setting and you're doing a presentation, you'll tend to turn around and talk to the screen. Big no-no. You can certainly make a reference to something on the screen, but immediately go back to where the audience is, right here. And if you're spending more time on the screen than on the audience, they tend to lose their focus on you. And if you're not wearing a lavalier mic and you're working with a podium mic, that's deadly when you're talking back to the screen, because the mic's way over here, and your voice is shooting that direction, it's not going to hear you. So be very aware about that. Don't worry about mistakes. We all make mistakes. The worst thing is to draw attention to them by apologizing or going, oh gosh, sorry. Awful. Most instances, they will hardly be aware you made a mistake if you don't draw attention to it. I mean, subconsciously they're aware you made a mistake, But if you draw attention to it, they'll really be aware. So if you mispronounce something or you mumble or stumble, don't worry. Just make the correction and keep shooting forward. And again, rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. Vitally important. Effective presentation in a panel Q&A format. That is where you're sitting with several people. The person who is introducing you is generally in charge, and maybe this will be you on instances, in charge of the whole presentation, even though other people will be talking. So that person has to know exactly what they're going to say the minute the camera comes up and they start their introduction. Have rehearsed ahead of time whatever preamble announcements you want to make. Be sure you have everybody's name clear, that you can pronounce them without stumbling. Be concise, direct, and on a pace as you're doing. Don't go, well, I guess we'll begin now. That looks unprofessional. You want to be poised and professional, polished. You want to just have it crisp and clean, just like I think your clothes should be. The presentation should be that way as well. But whether you're the questioner or the person who is being asked questions, you are, again, on the moment that camera comes on. And if the camera shot is fixed, that is, it doesn't have cutaways or can zoom in or anything, the entire panel has to almost assume they're going to be on the entire time. So even panelists who are sitting on the end, if they're not being introduced or they're not speaking, what do they need to do? They need to always look at the person who is speaking. You want to focus not just your attention, panelists. You want that to be a cue to the audience to focus their attention on the person who is speaking. So if that person is talking, you're like this. You're not taking notes, you're not shuffling papers, you're not adjusting your tie or anything else. Maybe you can move, and maybe there are times where you need to write something down. But as much as you can, stay focused on the person who is speaking. And as you're sitting there, panelists, and you're not being introduced yet, you still want to have that same kind of on-camera presence where you're sitting up, you're leaning slightly forward, your hands may be clasped in front of you, and you have that kind of positive energy coming with enthusiasm, with warmth, excited to be there, really can't wait to make your presentation, because that energy is an infectious quality. People at home don't know why they feel the way they do, they just do. And so if you're shooting down through the lens and out electronically into all the homes that are watching this, that kind of positive energy, they will respond much more favorably to everybody who is speaking, and more importantly, they will retain a lot more of what's being said. Always look at the person who is speaking, maintain a thoughtful, interested, pleasant expression, and minimize the adjusting of papers or taking notes. I like to repeat things sometimes when they're important because the act of repetition helps cement them in your consciousness. Both the host and especially the interviewee should maintain adequate eye contact with the camera. Now, if I'm introducing somebody, here's how I do it. This is the person I'm introducing. Bob is a great guy. He's got all kinds of great qualifications. Now, one thing about Bob that you need to know is that he's been doing this for about 30 years, and he's very excited to be here. But notice what I'm doing. I'm talking to Bob. I start talking to him, but I'm including you, and I'm looking back at you. I'm not just saying, Bob, it's really great that you're here as I'm introducing you. And even when I ask a question of Bob, Bob, my first question is, how do you figure this thing out about tax law? I mean, a lot of people are confused about this. So what is the main point that you'd like to notice? I'm looking back at you and back at Bob. So keep adequate eye contact on the camera lens. And I know for people who aren't comfortable doing this, if there happens to be somebody sitting in the audience, you tend to look at them because it's a human being. We're much more comfortable looking at a human being than an inanimate object like a glass lens. But you've got to practice doing that. And that, again, is writing that circle on the wall and putting it just above eye level and delivering your presentation to that drawing on the wall. It will help you once you get into the studio. Now, the host is responsible for a lot of things. Establishing the right tone, establishing the right pace. What I mean by tone is, you know, if it's serious criminal law, you don't want to be lighthearted about it. But if it's a lighthearted subject, I don't know what that would be. I mean, even tax law, you can have a little bit more energy there because it's, by definition, kind of a difficult, dense subject, and there's going to be a lot of technical information. So have some warmth there. Have some personality come out, Mr. and Mrs. Host, so that is sort of the established tone that people are getting in the audience who are watching. Outline what is to be covered, what the format is going to be like. We'll be talking with 5 different people. They represent 5 different areas of this area of the law. And then we'll have about 10 minutes of question and answer at the end so that the listener has an idea of what's coming up. The flow of the presentation. You're in charge of moving from one person to the next, listening to be sure that everybody has enough time and is getting equal amount of time to make their points, balancing the number of questions you ask, and then during the actual question and answer period, you're in charge of that. So sometimes if you have a ton of questions, you have to make a judgment. Which ones are the most important for the amount of time that we have to do the questions? You're in charge of overall timing. Do not look at your watch. That signals you're bored and would rather be somewhere else. Take your watch off, set it up on the table, do what I do, have a little clock and have that there off camera and refer to that periodically. But again, you're in charge of timing and you're in charge of wrapping up. So for a smooth event, the host has to know these things. Am I clear on the pronunciation of all names? What do I want to say at the introduction? Get all of that outlined in advance. Do I have a way of monitoring the time without having to look at my watch? Am I listening to what's being said to be sure all the key points are being hit upon? Am I ready to jump in if there's a technical problem? Happens all the time, often with slide decks. You need to think, okay, what am I going to do? How critically important are these slides to this particular presenter? And if you have a sense that they can do it without it, then just say, look, we'll just move on, but we'll have the slides. Once the presentation is put on our website, you'll be able to see them there. Whatever, just be sure that you don't have to just scramble in panic, that you've thought ahead of what you're going to do if there's a technical glitch that comes in. What needs to be covered in the wrap-up? Is there a phone number to be brought out? A website to direct people to? Do you want to make an announcement about the upcoming seminar that's going to be held next week, next month, or something like that? You want to do a pitch about your organization. You want to thank the individual presenters by name, thank the audience for listening, and then again direct them to whatever secondary information you want them to go. So I'm Bill Moller, and I hope these have been helpful in how to become more effective as a presenter. Feel free to contact the ISBA for more information, or if you'd like to talk to me directly, they've got my contact information. Thanks so much.